Hello everyone, welcome to From Combat Boots to Business Suits, the podcast brought to you by the Officers Association Scotland. My name is Jane Burns, your host, and my guest today is the lovely Mr. Matthew Maynard. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you very much.
It's such a pleasure to have you. Now, I am going to disclose a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge for our viewers and listeners, and that is that this isn't actually the first time you sat in this chair. We recorded a conversation about 2 months ago, didn't we?
That's right, yeah.
And you were the first guest that I had actually recorded for this podcast. And anyone that's ever tried to put a podcast together will totally empathise with my pain here. I went back to look at our footage and my camera had just cut out halfway through the conversation. So Matt very kindly agreed to come back. So this is kind of a redo of what we did.
It's a pleasure.
So we're going to get straight into it. Before we're obviously here today to talk about veterans in consultancy, which is definitely a topic that we get asked more and more about now at the OAS. But before we get into that, if you could please just give me a brief overview of your career in the military.
Yeah, sure. So I joined the Army in 1992 as an officer. I wasn't a graduate, so I went to Sandhurst for a year and commissioned in 93. I joined the Devonshire and Dorset Regiment. And then for the next sort of 20 years, I served as an infantry officer, mostly at regimental duty. I did a couple of staff jobs away. Later on in my time, we amalgamated to become the Rifles. But I left after I'd commanded a company and done a couple of staff jobs. So I got out in 2012.
And so just on that, before we get into obviously resettlement and beyond, what was your motivation for signing off, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's just that I'd done 20 years. I had achieved most of the things I wanted to, particularly commanding a company. That was a highlight. Although I had my moments, I wasn't really on that kind of top 10% sort of golden travelator that you need to be on if you're going to command a regular unit and then sort of go on up that sort of top tier career pathway, and I wasn't really on that. So no, I thought get out while you're still enjoying it. And also my second child had just arrived and I was only 40 years old and plenty of time for a second career, so seemed like the right time.
Yeah, that's pretty smart. I mean, a lot of the guests that I've spoken to since we had our first conversation have said similar things, like family motivation seems to come into it quite a lot, but also looking at the career progression and actually picking a really sensible time to stop. So 40, that's a good age, and unfortunately nowadays we're all going to be working for a long time, so you're be able to have a good long civilian career. So when you had signed off, did you have any idea whatsoever what it is that you actually wanted to do in your civilian life, work-wise? Yeah,
it's another good question. So I think the short answer is I didn't have a really sort of profound idea. I had some vague notion that I didn't want to go into financial services.
Yeah.
Because
why is that, just out of interest?
Well, I'm at the age where a lot of my mates left the army. My peers in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, they all went to London. They all went to financial services, and they all got burnt really badly in the financial crash of 08.
Okay,
and it's not a sector that particularly interests me anyway. It is a really interesting and vibrant sector in the UK, but it's not really very me. So I had a couple of options. I was quite interested in the energy sector, particularly oil and gas, but I think that was the only one that I had really looked into a little bit. Apart from that, I had a pretty open mind. And as some other people might have told you, I think it's quite a good rule of thumb that if you're looking for a job, a kind of 6-month window is about right. And of those 6 months, the first 3 is really kind of narrowing down what sort of sector you want to get into.
Yeah.
Because it's only when you've identified that you can start working your contacts and your networks to try and meet the right people to then start to get interviews in that sector.
And was there anything that you did specifically to in that narrowing down process? Was it just talking to people that you knew in various sectors, or how did you kind of start to narrow down?
Yeah, I did start to talk to people. I did look again at financial services, but I decided it wasn't for me. I did look a bit at the sort of security and risk world, but I didn't particularly want to get into that just because I'd done enough security stuff, and I wanted to do something different. And also because of what was happening in Iraq and Afghanistan at that time, that sector was probably going to shrink. So through those conversations, now I got more interested in the energy industry. So I started looking at that more closely.
Fantastic. So let's talk about, so you've signed off, you've kind of gone through that 6-month period, you've started to narrow down, and you have a bit more of an idea of the sector that you'd like to work in. Obviously, we're here to talk about your consultancy work, but is that what you started doing, or did you go straight into consultancy after you signed off, or did you do some other jobs in between?
No, I did go straight into consultancy, not because that's specifically what I was looking for, but when I did decide that I was going to go for the oil and gas sector, I was looking for really any job that could just get me in there, right? Yeah. Get a toehold, get a little beachhead, and from there I was hoping to branch out into something else. And I looked at project management, I looked at logistics, I looked at HR, various things. But where I actually got my opportunity was in consultancy, a big oil and gas service company, but part of its offering was consultancy, mainly in kind of risk. So that's how I got into the industry, and had plans to branch out from there, but in the end I didn't.
So when you got into that sort of first role, we get asked quite a lot about consultancy, and most specifically, what is it that you do on a day-to-day basis? So just thinking about the first job you did, we'll obviously talk a little bit more about your career more broadly, but it's obviously straight out of the military. What were the sort of main skills, and what were you doing day-to-day in that role?
No, sure. So, I mean, consultancy is obviously a huge area. It covers everything. Yeah. And I guess the thing about it is that clients will come to consultants because they need skills that they don't necessarily have in-house. And for a whole number of reasons, they need external people to come in and help them out. And I guess that is most commonly the fact that, they don't have the skills in their organization, or they might be trying to keep headcount down, so they don't want to have people in-house doing that. So there's a whole range of stuff and a whole range of skills. So the bit that I got into, I suppose you'd call it more the sort of operational end of consultancy. It was for an oilfield service company, and we did various training consultancy offerings for the big oil majors. So like BP, Chevron, Total, people like that. And what we offered them was a lot of stuff linked with sort of safety, risk management, emergency response, those sorts of things. And the first job I had, I did a little bit of actual consultancy, so working with clients to help them with their plans and procedures for those sorts of areas. But I was also a sort of operations manager. So we had a global team. We had about 4 or 5 hubs around the world. And my job was to sort of make sure that consultants were in the right place at the right time with the right visas and the right purchase orders, and all that sort of project admin was in place.
And did you find that you had a lot of transferable skills going into that sort of role?
Yes and no. So, that is a good question. I would say, in terms of what you can actually walk in with and start using on day one, and what you have to learn, it's probably about 50-50. Okay. I would say. Clearly, if you're new into a particular discipline, then you have to kind of learn that discipline, right? I didn't know anything about oil spills or helicopters ditching or anything like that. So I had to learn all that. Also, and this is very important, I think, for service leavers, none of us, because in the services it's not a thing, understand about business development and sales and how you market the business, how you do costings, how you write proposals. So that was, I had to learn all that. And then, there are some sort of aspects of consultancy that most of us would have to learn because we wouldn't know it, and that's to do with how you manage the organisation, particularly how you resource things. So you've got a certain number of people, They have to be utilised. You have to track how much billable time they're doing, how that's affecting your profit and loss and revenue and all the rest of it. So there was quite a lot to learn. The other half of it, though, the transferable skills, if you come from the military, there are definitely a whole load of them. I think the first one is just sort of dealing with people. So that's line management. And I did have a very small team. I think it was 3 or 4. So it's being able to kind of manage a team properly. Yeah. And we like to think we're reasonably good at that in the military. I think by and large we are. And so that's definitely one of the big ticks in the boxes. The second one, I would say that we always, we walk in and we can start to affect straight away, is that, the military is one of the very, very few organisations where you're actually taught and trained how to analyse and plan and execute. Mm-hmm. There are very, very few jobs out there that do that. Engineers do it, but in a very engineering kind of way. So to have that ability, and ex-army officers will remember things like the 7 questions and those sorts of analytical tools that we had, those are incredibly useful because you've actually got a process. It doesn't matter what the challenge is, you can adapt those things to, your bosses give you a problem or your clients give you a problem, you can analyze it, come up with a solution and write and, communicate a plan. So that's really useful. And then the third thing that I think is really important that military people bring, I'm not sure there's a word for it. You could call it sort of like office discipline or office skills.
Yeah.
So a big one is communication, verbal, written, PowerPoint. We are good at that in the military. Certainly if you've been if you've held any sort of vaguely senior rank, either as a senior NCO or as an officer, and you've had to brief senior people, that's incredibly useful.
Yes. And
people in the civilian world, it's not the same. It's very inconsistent. And the ability to write concisely and accurately, that is incredibly useful. And it's unbelievable how few people can do that. And that ability, to sort of run your business properly.
Yes.
To be prepared for meetings, to be well prepared, to brief correctly, to make sure your bosses have got everything they need. That is really useful and definitely marks you out from the crowd.
Because that's quite a common misconception, isn't it? That everyone that's working on Civvy Street knows how to run a business, knows how to run a meeting efficiently, how to run a diary, how to just be on time. And I think efficiency in general, certainly in my working experience, that isn't actually the case. And do you think actually several ex-military might end up quite frustrated when they walk into their first civilian job just by maybe how some things run, maybe not quite in that ship-shape manner?
No, it is a bit frustrating. It's a bit bewildering.
Yeah.
My last staff job was like in the commitments branch in Headquarters Land Forces. It's a well-known kind of bear pit, and if everything wasn't perfect, you got absolutely thrashed.
Yeah.
And to walk into an office where people just rock up for meetings without having prepared stuff and their PowerPoint's useless and they don't answer emails. Yeah, it is quite frustrating. Yeah. But, if you play your cards right, you quite soon become known as someone that gets that stuff right, which never hurts.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to backtrack. There's a couple of things that you'd said to me there that I kind of want to touch on because I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a listener, and also I'm going to actually use my own complete ignorance to the consultancy sector, maybe to the advantage of the conversation, because there was a couple of things you said that really stuck with me over the past couple of minutes. Number one was about going in and when you have to learn an industry. So the question I have is, my view of a consultant is that they're experts in the field. However, you'd mentioned going into an industry that you actually didn't have prior experience of per se. So how does that work exactly in terms of placing yourself as a consultant or selling yourself as a consultant to a company?
Yeah. Yes. So it's
I don't know if that's a silly
it's a
question.
really good point, and it is something that you have to take a little bit of care about. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, consultancy is a really broad church, right?
Yes.
And some businesses will go to consultants because they are absolute dyed-in-the-wool experts in that particular field. However, a lot of consultancy, I would say, is a lot more generic.
Okay.
And good examples would be something like the Big Four. Okay, so KPMG, EY, Deloitte, PwC. So they do a lot of very specific stuff, but they do a lot of quite general stuff. You could say like business improvement, and it's a great it's the skill that a consultant needs if you're doing that more generic thing, to be able to take a set of procedures or a template and adapt it to that particular industry. And okay, so in the oil and gas industry, I did a couple of courses actually as part of my resettlement. I used my ELC money. It's really basic stuff, just to understand which way up an oil rig goes. And so that's just so you can talk the talk a little bit.
We'll touch on those courses just a little bit later, just for anyone that might be interested.
Some of it, of course, you learn by osmosis. Yes, you need to put in a few extra hours when you first join just to understand how the business works and the sector. But later on in my career, I was doing it's still in risk management consultancy, but I had a really weird variety of clients.
Yeah.
I had power stations, 5-star hotels, top of the range shopping malls.
That's incredible.
Yeah, oil and gas, and you're flicking around them. And yes, I think the client would expect you to know some of the basics.
Sure.
But I think you're also helped by the fact that what they're also looking for is for you to understand a process and be really good at it and be able to adapt it to their particular sector.
Okay, I think that what you've just explained there is going to be really heartening to people who are listening that are interested in consultancy but really have this feeling of, I don't know if I need to be some sort of mad expert on things, but actually knowing that you've got those, it actually comes back to your transferable skills, doesn't it?
It does.
And that you can kind of sell those.
It does.
And that process.
And hopefully none of my clients are watching this, but there is also a bit of a sort of cliche about consultants being able to bluff their way slightly. Now, you have to be very careful, and clearly you can't overreach yourself. But I would say a certain amount of self-confidence is quite important, particularly if you're literally standing in front of a boardroom briefing and just knowing that sounding like you know what you talk about is quite important. And that is something that particularly ex-service officers are generally quite good at.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So the second thing that stuck with me is when you were talking about sales.
Yes.
Because a lot of people probably don't make that correlation. Again, something that to my ignorant brain, I wouldn't have made that correlation. So again, there's going to be people sitting going, hang on a second, Matt's just told me that I suddenly need to be a salesman. Could you just break down what you mean when you bring sales into the equation?
No, very glad you picked up on that, because that's a really important area. One of the kind of fundamentals about being a consultant, and it doesn't matter if you're on your own or you're working for, some massive firm like McKinsey's, is that you have to sell business. Okay, you're not a prime, you're not the top of the food chain. Okay, top of the food chains are, massive banks, big aviation companies, big oil and gas companies, big defense primes, whatever. Yeah. You are always trying to sell your services as a consultancy. And so for most consultancies that I've come across, it doesn't really matter where you are in the food chain. If you are a consultant, you will generally be expected to sell the business and grow the business, particularly if you are at a sort of managerial level. Although actually in many consultancies I work, even down to the most junior sort of consultants, you're expected to play a role in that. Now, you're absolutely right. For service leavers, that can be a bit sort of daunting, but it certainly doesn't need to be, because sales is not a kind of dark art. Yes, there are some techniques that you need to understand, but that is largely around things like pricing, how you put a proper proposal together, and how you work with the client to craft that. But again, that's not hard. That's the work of a couple of weeks to learn that. The rest of it is really it's probably about two things. It's about client management, which is really nothing more than people skills.
Yeah.
So being able to network, sit down with clients, have a coffee, talk about what you do without being too pushy. You don't have to be a sort of apprentice contestant.
Yeah.
So it's just that sort of people skills. And the second thing is knowing your product and being confident in it, and being able to articulate that nice and clearly and crisply. And frankly, if you can do those three things, it's not a problem. But no, it's a really important thing is that, if you are in a consultancy and you are in a management position, you will almost certainly be expected to have a business development role.
And do you think that's something that you can kind of learn on the job?
Yes, it is. Very much so. It's quite difficult. I think it's one of the tricky things to sell yourself when you're trying to go into consultancy, because particularly if you're going in a management position, which most sort of service leavers, senior associates and officers would want to do. But yeah, clearly it's not something we have to do in the military. But as I say, if you can emphasise, while you're trying to sell yourself, you can emphasise those other aspects of it, which is just good people skills, good communication skills, and having that kind of knowledge and confidence in a product. That's the way to get in.
That's the way to do it. I think there's also, my family are heavy in sales, and one of the things is, and I can imagine you being that type of person as well, is when you walk in, is that people probably feel like they can trust you as well. Is that kind of, rather than
kind.
But you've got that sort of professional weight behind you, I would say, in how you speak and how you present yourself. Less about being a sleazy car salesman and more just but kind of going, here's my product and I know that it can really genuinely work for you.
No, very much so. And I think the other thing I try and reassure people on is it's really rare. I've not really come across it. People might think that, you're given a sales target, and if you don't meet it, you get the sack.
Sure.
That is pretty rare. I think even in the sort of the most competitive consultancies, which would probably be things like, the Big Four, Atkins, McKinsey's, people are given fairly demanding sales targets. But if you don't meet them, it's not the end of the world. It may be that you're on a team that can sort of share their sales credits around. It may be that you just take a slight hit on a bonus or something. It's generally not one of those environments where, you're all given targets and the top 8 keep their jobs and the bottom 2 just go. That I've not come across that in consultancy.
That would then be specifically a sales role, there is still a distinction, right, between what you're doing.
Yeah, there is. No, you're absolutely right. And of course, if you work in any sort of reasonable size consultancy, there will be a dedicated sales team.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'll be doing a lot of the strategic stuff, handling key clients and so forth. I think for people a bit lower down, what we're trying to do is sort of upsell, and through our work, particularly for our own clients, showing what good job we can do, and the clients then ask for more work, and you're sort of growing the ink dot like that. But it's just one to be aware of. If you're a consultant, you will have targets for sales. You'll probably have targets for revenue as well. Okay. So how much revenue you're actually bringing into the company, which is linked to utilization. So how much billable time you're actually spending. So it's not the case. And some military people, I have noticed, are slightly guilty of this. It's not the case that you can come in and just sit down and say, right, well, I'm a business improvements guy, or I'm a risk management girl, or whatever, and I'm just a deliverer.
Yeah,
it's very unlikely that your job will be confined to that. You've got to get out and sell.
Okay, I'm really glad that we brought that up, because that is maybe a little bit of the missing puzzle piece for some people that are considering this line of work. So that's good. Up those sales skills, people. So before we move on, I just want to touch back on those courses that you'd mentioned. What ones did you do specifically, and do you find that they were useful?
I did a few. I did a couple that were very specific to the industry and the sector I wanted to go into. So I did a sort of basic, oil and gas drilling sort of instructional course. I wasn't actually on an oil rig, but that was just a week to tell you how the process works. I also did an ISO course for sort of risk management, which again was a week. That was just a tick in the box that I needed. I did do a couple of quite generic kind of business type courses. Bristol Management Centre, I think it was. I don't know if they've still got a stranglehold on the enhanced learning credits, but they were okay. I think they were a bit generic. If I had one piece of advice, it would be for people to make sure they do a course where you've not fully understand, but you've got a reasonable understanding of how business finance works.
Right.
So you can look at a profit and loss sheet, and you can understand the difference between, you know, revenue and profit, gross revenue, gross profit. You can understand profit margins, and you can sort of understand the difference between how projects generate revenue and the overheads. And so if you've got just a reasonable knowledge of that, if you can talk the talk, that's extremely helpful.
And that'll bleed in, I suppose, into developing those sales skills as well then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. So talking about your life then as a civilian more broadly, I don't even know if this was a consideration for you. You'd mentioned obviously you'd signed off, you'd just had your second child. How's your work-life balance, do you feel, since leaving the military?
It's now very good. When I first started doing consultancy for the oil and gas industry, that was quite tough, but that's only because of where we chose to live. I was having to sort of weekly commute up to Aberdeen.
Right.
So I think that's where I feel I did my kind of hard yards. And I was working quite long hours up there, but I was unaccompanied, so there's not much else to do. But no, since then, and I think this is fair for most consultants that I know. That's a bit of a generalisation, but I think work-life balance is fairly reasonable, particularly since COVID. I don't know many people in consultancy who don't have some kind of hybrid option.
Okay. Yeah.
When I left the oil and gas industry, I lived in the Middle East for 5 years, and I was a consultant for one of the energy ministries for a couple of years, and then I moved to my current firm where I was a consultant for another 3 years with them, and that was fine. There was a lot of it was one thing about consultancy is if you're actually delivering, you're going to be out with clients quite a lot. You tend to go to them, right? It's not like a law firm. Clients don't come to you.
Yeah.
And so you're sort of out and about. You're on the road a bit. Sometimes you're on the road a lot, but unfortunately that's part of the job. But because you're on the road a bit, that automatically gives you flexibility. So you find you're doing a bit in the office, a bit with a client, a bit at home.
Yeah.
And that's certainly how it worked for me. And now I've managed to, not entirely by my own design, but it's certainly where I wanted to get to, is that now I effectively work from home, but travel out to my tasks around the world when I need to, which is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. That's also something else obviously, as we said, consultancy is such a broad church, and it will depend obviously on what industry that you're working in, but certainly in what you do, you get to do a bit of travel, which for a lot of people will be quite appealing as well. That they're maybe looking for less going away than they had when they were in the military, but being able to still see that you can hop over to you'd mentioned the Middle East or various places, still having an element of that must be quite exciting as well. Just it is. Keeps life a bit interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people I know in consultancy do a bit of travel, because if you work for a consultancy of any size, it does tend to be a global operation. But the nice thing is, when you go away, it's only like a week or 2 weeks max. You don't have to go away for 6 months like you do in the military.
Yeah. So, and also it's worth mentioning, just on the flip side, just in case anyone is actually looking for no travel whatsoever in their civilian life, then perhaps this isn't maybe the best career path for them.
Possibly not. No, possibly not. I think it is certainly one of those roles where you probably got the option of being a bit of a house cat and just staying in the office and doing lots of remote stuff. But those people that do well are always those ones who are prepared to hold their hand up and go, I'll go to Côte d'Ivoire for a week, or I'll go to Edinburgh for a month or something. Which
is also part of that sales process as well, isn't it? It's that hunger to get in front of the client and be there in person and secure.
Yeah, that sort of that kind of expeditionary mindset is extremely useful. And actually, when I worked for that oil and gas company, you could see the difference. The ex-military people were a lot more happy to pack a holdall
and just get
their toothbrush and a passport and go off to some weird country for a week. It's a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So Thinking then on, is one question that I had, again, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of our listeners. Obviously, you're going into companies as a consultant. Does that mean that, again, this might be a totally baseline question, but does that mean that do you work self-employed, or do you go in on a contractual basis to a company and have a set period of time that you work with them, or do you become employed by them? How does it work employment wise?
No, so I mean, as we've mentioned, consultants come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But let's take a typical example. If you work for like a mid-sized consultancy, right? So no, you will be employed by that consultancy. Okay. So if I work for, it's not mid-sized, but if I work for Deloitte, okay, I will be employed by Deloitte. Okay. If a client then wants a service, which I'm part of the delivery team or I'm leading the delivery team, you will go and work with that client. You're still owned by Deloitte.
Yep.
Deloitte is clearly charging that client, and Deloitte is paying your salary.
Yeah.
And it may be, there's a whole spectrum of how it works, but it may be as a consultant, you are sort of almost physically embedded with the client. So you live and work in their office.
Yeah.
That does happen quite a lot. It may be that you just spend a limited amount of time or sort of half the time or something with the client, or it may be that you work mainly from your own office and you just dip in and out for a client meeting every couple of weeks. So there's all sorts of permutations, but no, normally it's your parent company that own you and salary you.
Okay, that's just good to know, because I was wondering if we would have to get into then self-employment and all of that sort of whole other rat's nest to get into, but that's actually good to know that at least.
I mean, look, there's lots of different ways to do it,
Sure.
and I do know quite a few people who are just self-employed, sole traders, or they own their own little limited company, and they are consultants, and they are paid directly by their client.
Right.
Some of them join sort of consortia that kind of take some of the salary. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it.
Yeah, but that's generally not how it's worked for you.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. Just to kind of start to wrap up the conversation, I really feel like you've actually quite demystified the consultancy, and certainly me, I feel like I've learned a lot more. So I can only imagine, hopefully you guys at home feel a little bit more well acquainted with the consultancy world in general. But let's just kind of talk directly to the audience now. If someone's signing off and going, I do get the feeling, I've listened to Matt, I get the feeling that this could be the life for me. What is the main pieces of advice that you would give for someone who's just getting started out of the military?
If you are minded to look into consultancy, okay. Well, it's a bit of a sort of sappy answer, because you same for most jobs, but you need to get out and start sort of talking to people. Absolutely, link with organisations like OA or FEC or whatever down in England, and start to network people who are in consultancy, because there's there's a huge range, right?
Yeah.
And I think you would need to get an idea of whether you want to do the more generic stuff, or whether there was a particular sector of consultancy you wanted to go into, because if you want to do something a bit more a bit more targeted, if you were an engineer, for example, you would need to start looking at what extra qualifications or accreditations you might need to get into that world. If you're more generic, a bit easier. So definitely start to do that. Once you've got a bit more of an idea about which sector you want to go into, that's very handy, because you can then start targeting your network a bit more specifically. If you're a generic person like me, you can then also start to look at what other kind of qualifications or ticks in boxes might be helpful, just to sort of get your foot in the door. So if you wanted to go into risk management consultancy like I did, you can go away and do a risk management qualification and get that tick in the box. So it is still really all about that kind of networking and slowly working out which avenue you're going to go down. But I mean, I think the other thing I would say is people, military leavers, got to have confidence in themselves, because as we've touched on, it's a little bit daunting, and you can sit down and because consultants are so kind of effortlessly confident. You sit down with these people and they're all like, and you think, oh wow, these guys are so amazing, and
that could never be me.
But of course they're not, and nor a lot of people that work in consultancy. The mistake we make is in the military. Your boss has generally done your job. Okay.
Yeah.
So everyone up and down the chain of command knows exactly what their subordinates and superiors or subordinates are doing and should be doing. So that's not the case in the civilian world. None of the bosses I've had, none of the bosses I've had have done the particular role that I'm in.
Yeah.
So it's a mistake to think that you're going in there and everyone's immediately looking at you thinking, oh yeah, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You actually do bring a huge amount to the party, as I hope we've made clear. So be confident and be clear about your skills and what you can bring.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm so glad. I am genuinely so grateful that we managed to do this conversation.
No problem.
For a second time. And actually, not that the audience at home will ever know this, but I actually feel like we had a more productive conversation this time. I think we got really into the ins and outs of consultancy that we didn't first time round. So I'm really grateful for that. I am going to ask you the question that I ask every guest. We are, of course, called From Combat Boots to Business Suits. And on your lovely mug that you will get to take home, actually, did we let you take the mug home?
I think we've got one from last time.
Then we're going to keep this one. No, I'm kidding on. You can take it, give it to friends and family. It'll make a great Christmas present, I'm sure. However, we do have here combat boots on one side and business suits on the other. I would like to ask you, please, which do you feel... How long have you been out so far?
12 years.
12 years, okay. So which one do you feel the most affinity with now, 12 years on?
Well, it's still combat boots, isn't it? Yeah. I don't think you have to do very long in the military before you feel that's where that's the most sort of formative part of your life. Yeah. I don't go to too many reunions and commemoration events from my various consultancies.
No, I'm sure. Exactly.
I keep in touch with mates on social media, but it's a different life.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, you actually are a regular fairly often at our events, of course, because your wife Jo works with us here at the OAS.
Yeah.
And just what do you get out of coming to the event still? Because just for veterans that maybe feel like, oh, you know what, I'd actually like to maybe reconnect and have a chat with people. Like, would you recommend still coming to the events?
Yeah, very much so.
After leaving? Yeah,
very much so. I mean, from a selfish perspective, I'm always quite interested in if there's anyone floating around that we could employ in my company.
Yeah,
and actually, one guy I've met at OA is now in quite a decent management position. He's our country manager in Ukraine. Brilliant. So that's from a selfish perspective, that's part of it. But no, it's also, I think it's quite nice as a veteran, as a service leaver, to hang out with people that are just about to go through that process. I think, generally speaking, you've probably got a couple of good bits of advice.
Yep.
But yeah, it's also nice just to, kind of hear the banter again.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much, Matt. It's been a real pleasure. For everyone at home, if you would like to learn more about anything that we've spoken about today, please do drop a comment wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. We will answer them all, I promise. And if you have anything specific that you'd like to ask Matt, you can either come and catch him over a wee drink at one of our events, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Or please send us in a question and we will happily pass it along. And if Matt can help, I'm sure certainly that you will do so.
Of course.
More broadly, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. Please do like, share and subscribe this podcast, and we will see you at the next episode. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.